They threw a lavish birthday party for my mom at my resort, and they didn't even invite me because they thought I was too poor to show up. Hi, I'm Melissa. My own family forgot I existed the minute I chose my own path, so I gave them a night to remember one with my name on the building, the invoice, and the screen behind the cake. When my mother saw the surcharge marked Family Premium, 40%, her hands shook. And when my father asked, "Why didn't you tell us?" I simply said, "You never asked. Have you ever been underestimated by the people closest to you? Tell me, what would you have done if your family walked into your success and didn't even recognize it?" I was sipping lukewarm chamomile tea when I saw the photo that would burn into my brain like the ring of a wine glass on an old mahogany table. Haley stood under a white trellis arms wrapped around our mother, both of them beaming like a perfume ad. The caption read, "Only the best for Linda Grant's 60th #family first #grateful #La Reverie estate." The hashtags felt like tiny knives. I hadn't heard a thing. No email, no text, no call. Not even one of Mom's passive-aggressive "just checking if you're still alive" voicemails. But there it was, in Haley's filtered frame, the whole family gathering under golden chandeliers and seasonal floral arches. Mom once told me over dinner I paid for, "Some people just don't fit the setting." I thought she meant mismatched silverware. I didn't realize she meant me. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft hum of jazz and the occasional honk from 38th Street below. My place was sparse by design's sleek lines, minimal decor. The only indulgence was a large canvas across from the couch, painted by a local artist I supported. A storm forming over calm water. It always seemed appropriate. I stared at the photo a long while. My thumb hovered over the like button, not out of any desire to acknowledge it, but more like the muscle memory of someone who still wanted to be included, even if just digitally. I put the phone down instead and leaned back. A few minutes later, curiosity won. I typed La Reverie into my calendar and waited for the system to catch up. Sure enough, the listing popped up. Booked. Full service. 3-night event block. Paid in full. It was under my company's name, Vera Blue Hospitality Holdings, one of our legacy shell LLCs designed for discretion. Haley wouldn't have had a clue. She probably thought she was dealing with some remote concierge who just happened to have great taste. There was a small spike of satisfaction in that, the kind that doesn't feel like revenge, just symmetry. I texted my dad. Me. "Hey, quick question. Are you and Mom doing something for her birthday?" The bubbles appeared, paused, disappeared. Then Dad. "Just a little something, nothing formal." A beat later. "Dad, Haley's handling the details." Of course she was. Haley always handled the details. Where to sit, what to wear, who to invite, and who not to. I remembered the last family gathering I actually attended 2 years ago. Thanksgiving at our parents' house in Connecticut. The mashed potatoes were dry, but the conversation had bite. I'd mentioned we'd just acquired a mountain spa retreat in Colorado. Mom asked if I was still playing hotels. She didn't say it with malice, just with that tilt of the head she saved for things like waiters who brought tap water instead of sparkling. They never really understood what I did. Or maybe they just never asked. In their world, I'd skipped the right path. I'd turned down a junior associate role in my uncle's investment firm and instead started scrubbing bathrooms in a boutique motel in Portland. That motel now stood as the blueprint for every eco-luxury property Vera Blue owned on 3 continents. But to them, I still wore a name tag. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and refilled my mug. The kettle squealed softly like it shared my irritation. A decade of independence. Millions in revenue. Dozens of properties. Still not enough to earn an invitation to the party. I walked back to the living room and sat down, pulled out my phone again, opened my text thread with Jordan, my COO and best friend since undergrad. Me. "They're throwing a party in my house." Jordan. "Wait, what? Mila Reverie, booked under Vera Blue, for Mom's birthday." Jordan. "You serious, me?" "They didn't invite me." Jordan. "Do we interfere?" I stared at the blinking cursor, then typed slowly. Me. Let's give them a show they won't forget. I sent the message and set the phone down, hands trembling slightly. Not from anger, not even hurt really, just that quiet, bitter ache that comes when you finally stopped being surprised. I thought of the linen napkins Haley would carefully fold, the playlist she'd tweak, the photographer she'd hire for that candid elegance, all of it layered with that curated grace they loved to perform while erasing me from the frame. They thought I was too poor to belong, but the truth was simpler. They were too blind to see. There's something deeply satisfying about signing off on a multi-million-dollar contract while wearing sneakers. My office in Manhattan wasn't grand by most CEO standards. No chandelier, no ego wall of awards. Just one long glass desk shelves of quietly humming server equipment and a view of the skyline that reminded me daily how far I'd come without anyone holding the door open. The override contract for La Reverie sat on my screen blinking at me for final confirmation. The birthday party was booked through Vera Blue's old concierge portal, still slick, still anonymous. I hovered over the digital signature field for a moment, then let my mind drift backward before clicking. 12 years ago, I was on my knees scrubbing grout in a Portland motel bathroom, bleach fumes stinging my throat, my back aching from double shifts. I'd just turned 21, had a hotel management degree from a mid-tier university, and no real connections. My parents were still pretending I was on a gap year. That was the year Mom called and said, "If you're not careful, you'll forget what pride feels like." What she didn't know was that I was learning it from the ground up. I was making $9.50 an hour and keeping a notebook in my pocket where I sketched lobby layouts between folding towels. I paid attention to guests who complained about scent diffusers and shower pressure. I learned which flowers lasted the longest in cold air and how lighting at check-in could shift someone's mood after a long flight. By 2014, I'd saved just enough to buy a 3-room boutique on the outskirts of Albany. No one in my family even noticed. I remember Dad asked me if I was still renting. I said, "In a way," he nodded, proud in the wrong direction. I lived in one of the rooms for 2 years, ate off a hot plate, and reinvested every penny back into the business. Guests came, left notes. Some returned. Slowly, weekend bookings turned into waiting lists. The place got picked up by a regional travel blog, then a design magazine. Then someone with a following posted a review that changed everything. That was when Jordan stepped in. She'd been an old classmate, brilliant, blunt, and already working as a junior analyst at a fund with an eye for niche hospitality. She visited the property, saw the systems I'd built, and asked me if I had plans to scale. I showed her a folder labeled Someday. She laughed, then offered to invest. The second property was in Asheville. The third, Jackson Hole. The fourth was La Reverie. It had been an abandoned vineyard estate. We gutted it, rebuilt from the roots, preserved the bones, but modernized the soul. I remember walking barefoot across the new ballroom floor before the first event, the soft wood warm beneath my heels. I thought, this is where I reclaim the narrative. And I did. Vera Blue became a name whispered in investor lounges, then spoken on travel panels, then written on custom keycards at 17 properties. We never shouted. We simply showed up elegantly and let the spaces speak. Back in the present, I tapped the screen to sign. The system chirped with quiet approval. Jordan stepped into the office holding a reusable water bottle and her laptop already open. They approved the vendor revisions, she said. "We're good to go on the scent profile. Neroli and cedarwood just like you wanted." "Perfect," I said, clicking through the rest of the checklist. "And the music cello trio. Low lighting, champagne with a touch of gold leaf. Nothing too loud. This isn't theater, it's exposure." Jordan looked at me, one brow raised. "You really want to be there?" I paused, then looked up at her. "I'm not crashing their party," I said. "I'm hosting it." She gave a short laugh. "Well then, I hope Haley likes the linens." I smiled. They were Italian, subtle, blue embroidery folded just the way she used to correct waitstaff about. Details mattered. I'd built an empire out of them. It's strange, really. The world doesn't always see the hands behind the beauty. But that's okay. I wasn't building recognition. I was building legacy. I clicked the last box and let the system load the final approval page. Owner signature, Alyssa M. Grant. The words glowed faintly on the screen, surrounded by silence. Sometimes pride isn't about being seen, it's about knowing you built the stage everyone else is standing on. The marble in the lobby was polished to the point of reflection. I watched Haley's red heels click across it in the security feed, a perfect rhythm of control. She barked an instruction to the floral team, gestured grandly toward the gift table, then laughed, hand delicately placed near her collarbone, just as she'd practiced since she was 16. The woman knew how to curate an evening. She just didn't realize who'd curated the room. I stood 3 floors above in a private suite reserved for high-tier investors. It had been locked until now, not for any special security, just timing. I could see the ballroom from the side panel windows, golden uplighting glassware sparkling a towering cake centered under the chandelier like a sacrament. Guests filtered in fur-lined coats and tailored suits, a parade of confident steps and tight-lipped smiles. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, former co-workers of Dad's, Mom's bridge friends with matching pearls and zero warmth. They sipped champagne and air-kissed each other like the evening was more performance than celebration. And in a way it was. At 7:07, Jordan's voice came through the earpiece. "We're set. AV is on standby. Manager knows the cue." I took a breath. Not to calm myself, I wasn't nervous, but to mark the moment. The kind of breath you take before stepping into light after years of shadow. Down below, Haley stood near the welcome arch, still gloating about the venue selection. "Oh, you wouldn't believe the pull it took," she told one of Mom's friends. "This place doesn't even list availability online." "Really?" the friend gasped. "So exclusive?" Haley smiled modestly, like someone accepting a crown. My mother, meanwhile, accepted compliments like a seasoned diplomat. We wanted something timeless, you know, and intimate. Our Haley, of course, handled it all. Then she added, not quite under her breath, "Alyssa doesn't do events." My fingers tightened slightly around the railing. The clock turned 7:10. The ballroom lights dimmed by a single level, enough to notice, not enough to alarm. A shift in tone, not a disruption. The maitre d' crossed the room with silent purpose and approached Haley, who had just lifted her glass for a toast. "Ms. Grant," he said just above a whisper, "the owner has requested a brief change." Haley blinked. "What do you mean, change?" Before he could respond, I stepped out from the back of the room. The sound of heels on stone floor never used to mean much to me. But in that moment, each step was a metronome, each click a reminder that I belonged not just in this room, but in every decision that made this evening possible. Heads turned. I passed the pastry table where the macarons were plated in a geometric pattern I'd sketched years ago. The floral arch behind me had been adjusted by my team just that morning. The music's soft cello, layered over piano, was selected from a set list I'd built for VIP tastings in Napa. The room wasn't just familiar, it was mine. I reached the front and turned toward the guests. "Good evening," I said, voice level, smile contained. "I hope you're enjoying tonight's celebration." Silence. The kind with weight. This evening, I continued, was crafted with love, intention, and care. By someone who until recently wasn't supposed to be here. A murmur. Someone near the back muttered my name. A few eyebrows lifted. Champagne flutes tilted suddenly less steady. "Everything you see," I gestured around the candles. The music, the scent you barely notice but now can't ignore. It was designed, selected, approved by me. Haley stepped forward. "You're making this about you." "I'm making it honest," I replied gently. "I'm not here to take credit, just to correct omission." Jordan stepped in silently, handing out sleek navy folders to a select few. Inside, a brief company bio-select press clippings and a custom-tailored invoice labeled Vera Blue Holdings. I turned toward the screen behind the cake display. Jordan gave a discreet nod. The projection shifted. Gone were the soft visuals of florals and drifting text. In their place, the Vera Blue insignia, then in clean serif font, La Reverie Resort, owned and operated by Alyssa M. Grant. The gasp that followed wasn't loud, but it was enough. It filled every crack left by years of dismissal. My mother stared, her fingers wrapped tightly around her champagne stem. Haley stood frozen, a practiced smile dissolving into static. I looked out at the room, faces ranging from stunned to vaguely admiring. "I was told I wasn't suited for this setting," I said, voice steady. "Tonight I thought I'd see it for myself." The room held its breath. Then, from near the back, someone cleared their throat. A distant cousin, I think, never particularly warm, but never cruel. She raised her glass slowly. To the woman who built the room, she was once denied, she said. A few more raised theirs, unsure but polite. It wasn't a standing ovation. It didn't need to be. Linda finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell us?" I met her gaze. Not coldly, just honestly. You never asked. The applause faded almost before it began. A few polite claps echoed near the bar, uncertain and hollow. The silence that followed was far more convincing. It hung in the air like thick perfume, expensive, but too much. People didn't know whether to smile or sip, so they did both awkwardly. I stayed at the front of the ballroom for a moment longer, watching it all settle. Some guests stared at their champagne as if it held the right reaction. Others looked around trying to see who would make the first move. Haley recovered first, of course. She always did. Her voice was smooth, practiced just loud enough. "Well, of course Alyssa was involved," she said with a tight smile. "We collaborated on everything." I turned slowly, just enough to meet her eyes. Not challenging, just correcting. "You selected the cake," I said softly. "I built the kitchen." The room didn't gasp, but it shifted. I could feel it. A ripple of recognition that the power had already moved elsewhere. Jordan was already in motion, gliding through the crowd with the ease of someone who'd done this before, handing out the slim navy folders we'd prepared. Nothing ostentatious, just the facts a brief about Vera Blue, the design philosophy behind La Reverie, and a line item invoice tucked behind a cream vellum sheet. Guests murmured as they opened them. Someone chuckled. Another whispered, "She owns the place." I caught sight of Aunt Julia holding her folder like it might be a fragile art print. Her husband peered over her shoulder, eyebrows rising. Somewhere near the cocktail station, one of Mom's friends mouthed something that looked like impressive, then promptly looked away when Haley noticed. Mom hadn't moved. She stood near the front table, hands still gripping her champagne flute like it was an anchor. Her posture was perfect as always, but her fingers trembled slightly against the stem. One of the staff almost imperceptibly stepped beside her and handed her the folder. She didn't open it right away, just looked at it as if trying to decide whether it was a threat or a formality. Haley took a step toward me, smile still frozen. "You're turning this into a press event." I kept my voice even. "No cameras, no speeches, no press, just truth." Jordan passed behind me, pausing at the AV station near the side wall. The screen now displayed a simple title card, "Vera Blue presents La Reverie, Hudson Valley," underneath in smaller print, curated by founder and CEO Alyssa M. Grant. A few more guests clapped tentatively, then with growing confidence. Not a standing ovation, not yet, but enough to shift the air. Mom finally opened her folder. Her eyes scanned the first page quickly, then the second, and then she froze. I knew the exact line she'd reached. "Family premium rate 40% above standard corporate pricing." Her head snapped up. "You charged us extra?" she asked, voice barely audible but sharp around the edges. I took a step forward, letting the words come without bitterness. "No," I said. "I charged you what I was worth." She didn't respond. Not right away. Her eyes darted over the pages again as if searching for a loophole. Dad stepped beside her. He hadn't spoken yet tonight. He rarely did in public unless prompted. He looked at the folder, then at me. His face didn't register anger or embarrassment, just calculation. And maybe beneath that something close to regret. Haley took another sip of champagne. I noticed her hand wasn't as steady as usual. "Was this your plan all along?" she asked. "To humiliate us?" I shook my head. "If I wanted to humiliate you," I said gently, "I'd have invited the press." That drew a nervous laugh from someone near the back. Then another. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Camille, our cousin on Dad's side, walked forward from the second row of tables. I hadn't spoken to her in years. We'd been close once before careers and distance and family politics stepped in. She held her champagne glass, not like a toast, but like a statement. To the woman she said clearly who built the building before we ever learned her name. This time, the clapping came easier. It wasn't wild, but it was real. Haley stood still, her jaw tight. Mom folded the invoice neatly as if returning it to a waiter. Dad looked at me, and for the first time that evening, really saw me. The room had shifted, and there was no going back. The party ended, but no one really left. They lingered. Some clutched coats too tightly. Others poured last sips of wine just to feel less awkward. Laughter faded into low murmurs. Small groups hovered near doorways, waiting to see if someone else would signal the proper moment to leave. It was that strange post-event stillness, the kind where people realize the page has turned, and they aren't sure they're in the next chapter. I slipped into the private lounge without much noise. The room was smaller, more intimate wood-paneled walls, velvet chairs, soft firelight reflecting off half-empty glasses. It was meant for exclusive tastings, executive retreats. Tonight, it felt like a confessional. Jordan had followed me in just long enough to refill my tea and say, "I'll give you space." She was always good at reading the room and me. As the door eased shut behind her, I heard faint laughter from the hallway. Then silence again. Mom sat near the fireplace, hands still folded tightly in her lap like she was bracing for turbulence. Dad hovered beside her, 1 foot angled toward the exit. Haley, of course, stood. She was too restless to sit, too uncomfortable to stay still. Her arms were crossed, her lipstick slightly faded, and she stared at me like I was both the villain and the audience. "I suppose this was your way of punishing us," she said. Her tone wasn't loud, but it cut. I met her gaze without blinking. "No, revenge is messy. This was clarity." "Clarity," she repeated, laughing, once brittle. "You hijacked Mom's birthday and made it about you." "No," I said again, slower. "I made it visible." "You made it about me the moment you left me out." Haley exhaled, hands clenched. "You think you're the only one who ever got ignored? I worked just as hard, Alyssa." I tilted my head. "Then why pretend I don't exist? Why stage a celebration in my space while pretending I wasn't even worth a mention?" She didn't answer. Mom finally spoke. "We didn't think you'd want to come." Her voice was low, almost apologetic. "You're always busy." "Distant. You mean I don't come when called?" I replied, not unkindly. "That's not the same as distant." She looked away. Dad moved to speak, then stopped. His mouth closed again like the words weren't quite ready. The silence stretched. "You didn't think I'd want to come," I continued, "because you didn't think I belonged." That landed heavier than I expected. Haley's shoulders shifted her weight, shifting side to side. Mom flinched, not visibly, but enough. "You've always done your own thing," Mom offered a little sharper now, as if justifying something. "You wanted your freedom. You walked away from this family." "No," I said. "You just never walked toward me." Dad looked at me, then eyes steadier than before. He stepped forward slightly. "I always thought you'd come around," he said. "Like, eventually you'd find a place." "I did," I replied. "You just weren't looking where I built it." The silence that followed was different, not angry, not even sad, just exposed. Mom's voice broke the stillness. "We were wrong," she said quietly. "I didn't see you." Her eyes met mine. For the first time, not with judgment or dismissal, just admission. I didn't react right away. I didn't want to gloat. There's no pleasure in someone else's reckoning when it comes this late. That I said is what hurt most. A long pause. The fire cracked. Haley walked over to the dessert cart and plucked one of the leftover cake slices into a napkin. She didn't say anything for a few beats. Then, as she moved toward the door, she muttered without looking back, "Next time, just send an invite." I smiled softly. "I did," I said. "You didn't recognize the name on the header." Everyone had left, except my father. The suite was quiet, dimly lit with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Hudson River. The sky outside had settled into that velvet blue just before dawn, the kind that softens everything, even old wounds. A breakfast tray sat untouched on the table, croissants, cooling coffee no longer steaming. I had requested it out of habit, not hunger. Some mornings were meant for routine, not appetite. I stood barefoot near the window arms, folded loosely, watching headlights snake along the highway far below. The events of the night replayed in fragments. Haley's tight smile, Linda's trembling hands, the way Camille raised her glass. None of it felt triumphant. It just felt necessary. There was a knock at the door. Soft, not urgent. I turned, walked across the suite, and opened it. Dad stood there with both hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched the way he always stood when he wasn't sure what came next. No tie, no blazer. Just the version of him I remembered from Saturday mornings when I was a kid. Quiet, comfortable, somehow gentler. "I figured you might still be up," he said. I nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." He walked slowly into the room, eyes scanning everything, the lighting, the rugs, the framed black and white photos on the wall. One showed a waterfall tucked behind a luxury cabin in Montana. Another, a vineyard from our Tuscany property. They weren't labeled. He recognized none of them. "You've done all this?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "Every property, every decision. I signed the leases. I designed the menus. I've walked every hallway." He looked again, slower this time, then let out a quiet whistle, the kind he used to reserve for new cars or surprise touchdowns. "I didn't know you had all this," he said. I didn't smile. "Because you never asked." He didn't argue. He just nodded. A long pause followed, the kind that held more than words. "I think he began, then paused somewhere along the way. We thought if you weren't following the path we laid out, you were lost." I looked at him then. Not with anger, just clarity. "I wasn't lost," I said. "I just wasn't yours to direct." He nodded again. "I can see that now." Another pause. Then he walked to the window and looked out at the river. The lights from the bridge shimmered faintly on the surface. He turned toward me, hands still in his pockets. "Okay." So he asked, voice low, "Where do we go from here?" I sat down on the edge of the couch, gesturing for him to take the chair across from me. "One honest conversation at a time," I said. He didn't smile, but something in his shoulders eased. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I glanced down. Haley. "Next year. Maybe we do it together?" I looked at the screen for a long moment. Then typed back, "Me. We'll see. I know a place." Dad saw the message but didn't ask. He just sat back, eyes now on the artwork above the fireplace, an abstract swirl of navy and gold. Something Jordan had picked, something warm. He looked around the suite one more time. "You know," he said almost to himself, "I used to tell you that hotels weren't homes." I smiled faintly. "And tonight," he nodded once, "feels a little like one." He used to say hotels weren't homes, but that night in the quiet of the suite, he once told me I'd never deserve. My father looked around and admitted he was wrong. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like closure. Sometimes what hurts most isn't being forgotten, it's never being truly seen. And yet with enough patience, grace, and a little courage, even the deepest silence can become the start of a real conversation. We can't rewrite the past, but we can choose what kind of presence we bring into someone's future. If this story reminded you of a moment you wished had gone differently, or one you're proud you faced, feel free to share it. I'd love to hear how you found your way back to yourself too.